Hello again. So having described the main phases, the main stages of cryptographic systems, I think we are ready to describe how SSL TLS, widely used and well-known cryptographic system works. Now, keep in mind that um, during the description of TLS, I just wanted to give you the main idea, right? The intuition, let's say. So I avoid describing the exact steps of the protocol just because sometimes this would be part of one of your courseworks. So you'll have to find out the exact steps on your own. Good. So SSL TLS. So when you make a purchase over the internet, sensitive traffic is usually protected by a cryptographic system, which was originally called Secure Sockets Layer, SSL for short. So SSL, originally created by Netscape and placed in its browser. I don't know how many of you remember Netscape, but it was pretty popular in the 90s. Then all major browser vendors supported SSL, including Microsoft, which was was holding back a bit. Later, it became a standard by IETF and renamed to TLS, Transport Layer Security. So nowadays, we don't really use the abbreviation SSL, but rather TLS. Now, when TLS is used, URLs, instead of beginning with HTTP, they begin with HTTPS. S obviously stands for security. Good. So SSL TLS offers transport layer protection, meaning that all application layer traffic can be secured. Nevertheless, this protection of higher layer messages is not transparent, as higher layer messages are not automatically protected. In order to be protected, applications have to be what we call SSL aware, and most browsers and web servers, server applications are, very few others. So we've got Alice and the server, so your client and the server. So basically, Alice is exchanging messages with the server. So SSL protects all traffic that is SSL TLS aware, and SSL TLS works at transport layer. Now, let's see the operations of SSL and TLS. So first of all, the first step, as we already described in the previous video, we have 4 stages, right? It's 4 phases in all cryptographic systems. So the first step here is the negotiation of security options. So basically, Alice will contact the server and they will start a negotiation phase where they will agree on all the kind of crypto algorithm they will be using, all the parameters. Then the server authenticates itself to the client by sending a digital certificate. Customer authentication is optional and uncommon. So in the first step, Alice and Trent will agree, for example, on the kind of encryption algorithm they will be using, both symmetric and asymmetric, the versions of the algorithms, the hash functions that they will be using, the digital signature schemes that they will be using, and so on and so forth. So they will agree on all the security parameters. After the end of that phase, we move to the second phase where the server uses its digital certificate to authenticate himself to Alice, right? So Trent will send his certificate to Alice. Upon reception, Alice will verify the identity of Trent by looking at the certificate. Now, I say here that customer authentication is optional and uncommon. Why? So the reason for optional client authentication is pure pragmatism, basically to lock out the vast majority of customers that are not willing to get digital certificates. And this does, it really does not make business sense. Imagine that how we do the mutual authentication with certificates is like each entity needs to have obtained the certificate and then send that certificate to the other end, to the other party, and the other party will be able to verify the identity of the sender, right? Now, imagine that Trend here, like Amazon server, for example, has already obtained a certificate. Now, what about Alice? Alice can be, for example, simple user, right? Like my dad, for example, my dad doesn't know what a certificate is, and even if he knew, probably he wouldn't know how to get a certificate and how to use it, right? So it's really, that's what I mean when I say that the reason for optional client authentication is pure pragmatism. Nevertheless, when you buy something on Amazon, you've got another type of authentication through your username and password. Good. Now, after the second phase, we move on to the third phase, where the client basically generates a random session key, which sends it to the server encrypted using public key encryption. Here we have got two things that I would like to mention. The first thing is the obvious, exactly what it says, that Alice generates a session key, an ephemeral key that will be used from now on with Trend, with the server, to secure all the ongoing communication between them. So Alice generates a session key. She uses Trend's public key to encrypt that session key and sends that session key to Bob, to Trend, sorry. So Alice obtained Trent's public key from the certificate, from Trent's certificate that she received on phase number 2. Now, something you might think it's a bit weird is that Alice is generating the session key, right? So in lecture 4, when we started analyzing protocols, the first protocol that we described was a protocol that Alice wanted to establish a session key with Bob. If you remember that protocol, the first example of that protocol at least, Alice was generating the session key. She was sending that session key to Trent, and Trent was basically forwarding that session key to Bob. And at the end, Alice and Bob, they were using that session key to secure their communication. Now, we said at that point that that protocol had an undesirable feature, not a flaw, but an undesirable feature. And the undesirable feature was that the session key that would be used to secure all the communication between our two friends, Alice and Bob, was generated by Alice. And that was bad because Bob had to trust that Alice would generate a good key, right? A fresh key, a long enough key, and so on and so forth. While what we said at that point is that the only entity in that scenario that was trusted by both Alice and Bob was Trent. So therefore, Trent should be the one who would generate the session key. However, in this scenario, Alice is generating the key, and this is not a problem. So imagine that you are doing your purchase online on Amazon and you want to encrypt your credit card number, right? So basically, it's your responsibility to generate a good key. Okay, we are talking about protecting your asset. So there's no Bob involved here, right? That's why this can work. Okay, so I hope you see the difference between the two examples, right? So here there's no Bob, it's only Trent and you want to generate a key that will protect your assets, right? Your credit card number. So you need to make sure that you generate a good key. And then we've got the last phase of the protocol, where ongoing communication with confidentiality and server digital signatures are taking place. Good. So let's see more details of the protocol. So again, Alice and Trent. So Alice contacts Trent, says, "Hi, I'd like to set up an encrypted session with you. Here is a list of ciphers that my browser supports. And here is the SSL TLS version that my browser supports. Here is a list of cryptographic hash functions that I can use," and so on and so forth. Now, upon reception, Trent basically will check the list of ciphers and SSL TLS version and all of this that was sent by Alice. He will find the latest common versions of all these ciphers and protocols that both parties can support. Okay, Alice's browser and Trent's server, and he will reply back to Alice by saying, "Okay, Alice, so here is the cipher suite that we will be used to encrypt our data. Here is the SSL TLS version that we will both use, and here is my digital certificate through which you can basically obtain my public key." right? And also verify my identity. Upon reception, Alice verifies the certificate and extracts Trent's public key. Then she generates a symmetric key, a session key, that she has to send back to Trent. And to do so, she will use Trent's public key, PK of S, PK of the server. The public key of Trent will be used to encrypt the session key K that Alice generates on her end, right? So Alice first verifies the certificate, extracts Trent's public key, generates the symmetric key, the session key that will be used to encrypt their communication, encrypts that key with with Trent's public key, and contacts Trent to send this message. Upon reception, Trent basically, who has access to SK of S, to his secret key, he can decrypt that message, recover the session key that was generated by Alice, and basically they can start from that point, they can start communicating securely by using K. So this is where the last part of the last phase of a cryptographic system is initiated, where after they establish the key, Trent basically can use K to encrypt all of the exchange messages from now on, right? So this is in a nutshell how SSL TLS works. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I avoid the details on purpose, just because sometimes I give this as a coursework, as part of one of your courseworks, right? But anyway, you get the main idea. So let's go back to one of our first examples in this course, with the login form that we described on lecture 1. So we have a typical login form. We've got Alice and Bob. I hope you did not forget that Bob is our server in that example. So how this works, Alice basically on her browser types in her username and password, and then she presses the login button, and once you press the login button, basically a message is generated containing Alice's username and password, and this is sent to Bob. Good. So how can TLS help us here, right? So we said that if we just send that message in clear text, basically there's no protection. Eve can get access to both the username and Alice's password, and basically she can use that to impersonate Alice, right? Which is something that we really would like to avoid. So how can we use TLS here? So let's see what we can do. So Alice basically will send to Bob a hello message. I would like to log in to your service securely. So Bob will reply back to Alice saying, hi there, here's my certificate, so you can basically verify my identity as well as extract my public key. Also at this point, we assume that they have already agreed on the security parameters that they will be using. And then basically Alice generates a secret key, the session key, encrypt that key with Bob's public key. She sends that encrypted version of the key to Bob. Upon reception, Bob can decrypt it by using SK of B, his secret key, and then basically Alice can just send her username and password encrypted with the session key that was generated earlier, right? So that's more or less how the login will take place by using TLS. It's not exactly how it takes place. We have much more things than that. I mean, one of the things that you need to remember, we already discussed about it on lecture 1, I think, is that again the password should not be sent like that, because we cannot trust Bob to store Alice's password in his local database in clear text, right? So we don't want Bob to get access to the password. Usually we use hashes and some other techniques to store the password. But anyway, this is the main idea of how basically we can use TLS to protect our login form. And by doing this, we achieve our goal, which is to frustrate Eve. And why we frustrate Eve? Because Eve cannot get access to any information related to Alice's account, username and password, Alice's sensitive information regarding Alice's account, I mean username and password, because it doesn't have access to the session key that was used to encrypt that particular message, right? So we frustrate Eve and therefore we achieve our goal. Good, so perspective on SSL TLS. So while SSL is widely used and it's a really nice protocol, I would say, so it's a flawed cryptographic system. So why is a flawed cryptographic system? Because first of all, only one side is usually authenticated, and it also has many weaknesses. Provides only medium security. However, exploitation is rather difficult. Usually, it is far easier to hack into merchant servers and steal lists of thousands of credit card numbers. But there has not been a single reported case of a credit card number reading en route while protected by TLS. Okay, and this is important to know. So even though it is a flawed protocol, it is secure to use as long as it has been implemented properly, right? Now, it provides only medium security, but exploitation is difficult. So SSL suffers from an attack known as the bar mitzvah attack. I can't pronounce it correctly, I'm sure, but anyway, which exploit a weakness in the older, less secure RC4 encryption algorithm option in SSL TLS that is still supported in many browsers and servers. Now, the point here, what I would like to highlight here is that it's important for all of us to update our software. Okay, so even though SSL TLS is secure in theory, and as I said earlier, there has not been a single reported case of a credit card number being read en route while protected by TLS. There might have been bugs in the implementations, right? Or there might have been versions where they have been using algorithms that they are not considered as secure anymore. So it's really important that we keep our systems always up to date with the latest patches and security releases. There is a nice paper, interesting paper that you could read. Its title is "The Most Dangerous Code in the World: Validating SSL Certificates in Non-Browser Software." It was published in 2012 at CCS conference. Now, SSL TLS uses public key encryption to sign every message. So this is something that I have avoided showing in the protocol that I described in the previous slides. But keep in mind that SSL TLS uses public key encryption to sign every message, which makes it very computationally expensive. Okay, it is expensive, but at the same time, it provides certain guarantees, security guarantees. Now, what does computational expensive means? It can be translated like as that merchants can handle only a few % of the transactions they could without SSL. Of course, this was much more evident, I would say, in the old times, in the previous years, where we didn't have all these cloud services and unlimited resources. Apart from that, SSL TLS is built into all browsers and web servers, has been one of strong security points for the entire internet. Right, so as we already said, when SSL is in place, URLs, they start by HTTPS and not just HTTP. Now, whenever you see that sign on your browser, you can just click on it, okay, and this will allow you to open and examine the certificate of the server that you are communicating with. So if you look at that, you will see similar to this screen where it will say, for example, the purposes that the certificate is intended for, to whom the certificate has been issued to. So obviously, in what you see here, it says issued to Microsoft.com. So basically, I visited Microsoft.com, I clicked on HTTPS log, and I got that. So I can see that, yeah, this certificate goes, what has been issued to Microsoft. I try to visit Microsoft.com, so all good. Issued by Microsoft RSA TLS CA certification authority. So you get to know the actual certification authority that issued that certificate. And apart from that, you can also see the period for which that particular certificate is valid for. So you can see that it was issued on the 29th of August 2020, and it will be valid for 1 year, right, until the 29th of August 2021. Now, if you click on details tab here, you will see much more information. For example, you will see the signature algorithm that will be used. It was used SAT 256 RSA. the signature hash algorithm SAT256. You will see the public key, the algorithm that was used for the public key, and so on and so forth, right? And finally, you will see the certification path, which is, I don't know if you remember on when we described the digital certificates, we talked about the hierarchy, the certification authority hierarchy. So we said that we have, let's say, the master CA that has a self-signed certificate, and that CA can generate certificates for all the presenting certification authorities, and these authorities, they can generate certificates for other authorities underneath them, and so on and so forth. So here we can see that the main certificate was generated by DigitCert Baltimore root, who generated a certification for Microsoft RSA, and Microsoft RSA TLS Certification Authority generated a certificate for the website www.microsoft.com. So basically you see the entire hierarchy, okay? And then you trust that certificate that you got from Microsoft.com because you trust Microsoft RSA TLS CA, because you trust DigitCert Baltimore root. Okay, so you trust the root CA. So these are much more information you can see basically by clicking on the HTTPS lock icon on your browser. Now, the last slide is sometimes you get to see this kind of message, right? So what it says here, first of all, it's a bit frightening, right? It has this red color, it has this sign here, and it says that the site's this exclamation mark, and it says that the site security certificate is not trusted, and then exclamation mark. So this is kind of scary in first place. Then you look a bit more closer to the address of your browser, and you see that there is HTTPS, but it's, you know, strike through, while the lock has been also strike through as well. So what does this mean? I mean, the message says that you attempted to reach that domain, but the server presents a certificate issued by an entity that is not trusted by your computer's operating system. So first of all, you can understand that there is a certificate here, right? So nevertheless, the problem is that the certificate has been issued by an entity that your machine is not trusting. Okay, so it's not, for example, from VeriSign, that is a trusted certification authority with several certificates already installed in your browser. It comes from a certification authority that you do not know, or simply you don't trust. Now, that's one thing. The other thing is that even though HTTPS has been striked through here, it doesn't mean that your connection with the server has not been encrypted. Okay, so it is encrypted. The problem, or the possible problem, is that the public key that you are using, anyway, you are communicating with someone that you may not trust. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that every time that you send a message to that server, that message will be sending clear text. No. Still, even though the certificate is not valid, the connection between your browser and that server will be always encrypted. Okay. The only difference is that the certification authority who issued that certificate to that server has not been is not trusted by your machine. Now, if you are just using a service that you fully trust, then you can just go on and proceed anyway. If usually we see this kind of stuff in local environments where you have been building and testing an application, and you know that, okay, this is normal. Now, if you try to visit Microsoft.com and you see this kind of, or Amazon.co.uk, whatever, and you see this kind of message, then obviously you need to drop your connection, right? Something is wrong. We believe that, you know, either, anyway, all these big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and so on will never have a certificate that will not be valid, either expired or signed by a certification authority that your machine does not trust. So this obviously means if you see something like that when you try to visit one of the popular online services and you see this, then immediately run away. Yeah. That's it. Thanks a lot. So next video we will talk about another cryptographic system, Kerberos. We will get into details of how Kerberos works. It is, in first place, it looks a bit complicated, but the main idea is pretty simple and I would say fascinating. Thanks a lot. Bye.